We lost 13 great people. What a horrible day it was. We didn't lose one person in 18 months. And then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan.
The other thing our veterans care a lot more about is that 3 years ago, 13 brave, innocent Americans died, and they died because Kamala Harris refused to do her job, and there hasn't been a single investigation or a single firing. I don't, look, sometimes mistakes happen. That's just the nature of government, the nature of military service. But to have those 13 Americans lose their lives and not fire a single person is disgraceful. Kamala Harris is disgraceful. We're going to talk about a story out of those 13 brave, innocent Americans who lost their lives. It's that Kamala Harris is so asleep at the wheel that she won't even do an investigation into what happened, and she wants to yell at Donald Trump because he showed up. She can go to hell.
Veterans Day, Arlington Cemetery. Because of your political thoughts or leanings, one thing I think we should all agree on is that when it comes to paying our respects for those who have sacrificed, made the ultimate sacrifice to allow our freedoms that we enjoy today in most of the world, specifically in America, you have to pay just your respects. Politics goes out of the window. It would appear in the former losing, what name would you want to call him? You know who. Doesn't mean anything. Just another photo opportunity. That's bad enough. There is also now quite clearly a cover-up going on with regard to an altercation. Yeah? Something happened. Something very, very bad happened. I've tried to put a few clips together to explain the story. Corey Lewandowski, who's now firmly in the Trump campaign, doesn't really help shed any light on anything. We'll start with him. Here he's on with Ari Melba. If you have ever served, if you have family members who have served, maybe somebody in your family was one of those who is, is buried at Arlington, or you have connections with somebody who's buried at Arlington, or even if you're just a decent, like-minded citizen like the rest of us, please leave a comment on just your thoughts on anybody, least of all a former losing president, abusing the air of respect you pay to those who are the fallen soldiers.
For politicizing America's war dead on hallowed ground.
What a horrible day it was.
The campaign on Tuesday posting this TikTok highlight video of Trump's trip, showing him laying a wreath in honor of the service members killed at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan and posing with family members among the gravestones. Several campaign staff posting their own content too.
It's disrespectful. It's not Disney World. It's Arlington National Cemetery, and it should be respected as such.
The visit first drawing scrutiny after a reported altercation between campaign and cemetery staff over photography. The Trump campaign saying a staffer, quote, decided to physically block members of President Trump's team during a very solemn ceremony. A cemetery spokesperson writing, federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army National Military Cemeteries. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. The Harris campaign calling it all a sad episode, saying Trump has a, quote, history of demeaning and degrading military service members. The vice president herself has not commented on.
As a veteran who served for 20 years and 28 days during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the Gulf War, and the Iraq War, retired honorably, and have upheld my oath every day since September 30th, 2006, my retirement day. But on this day, a fucking treasonous traitor who tried to overthrow the government on January 6th, 2021, a convicted felon, an adjudicated rapist, liable for fraud, degenerate, misogynistic pig, lying grifter who pushed Bibles and now pushing books about bullshit, was allowed to go to Arlington National Cemetery on no special day and lay a wreath. What the fuck and who in the fuck allowed this motherfucker to do that shit and defecate on our fallen soldiers that are buried there? You heard what I said, defecate. And you motherfucking maggot motherfucking veterans that are okay with this treasonous traitor, as I said, your fucking service means nothing, because the oath that I took and the fucking oath that you took, you shitted on. But I want to know who the fuck allowed this motherfucker to go today and lay this wreath for a fucking photo op at the expense of our fallen brothers and sisters. You fucking right, I'm pissed off. This motherfucker has no fucking low. Fuck every single motherfucker that walks this fucking planet that supports this rotten motherfucker.
Well, we do know that the cemetery has filed an incident report, and defense officials tell us that's because members of the Trump campaign staff were aggressive both physically and verbally towards a cemetery staffer. That staffer was trying to enforce rules that prohibit campaigns from filming at grave sites across the cemetery, but especially at Section 60. Section 60, as you noted, is an emotional spot in the cemetery for so many, because it is where many young veterans killed in Iraq and Afghanistan are buried. The Trump campaign denies that any incident occurred and that the campaign had explicit permission from the families to be in Section 60. However, federal law, according to the cemetery, dictates those guidelines, and the cemetery staff is very strict at enforcing them, so that the burial sites of so many veterans who have sacrificed their lives under administrations, regardless of party, are not used as political props. The cemetery says they're not going to release any more information because they do want to protect the identity of the individual involved. But you can be sure that many news organizations will request that incident report from the Pentagon, from the local police departments.
He was in Section 60, which is the burial site for service members recently lost. Apparently, this visit turned into some kind of physical incident, and it sounds like people who were on the staff of the cemetery were trying to block a Trump campaign photographer from going over and taking pictures of Trump there at the cemetery. Your reaction to that? I mean, my understanding from visiting Arlington National Cemetery, I was looking at the website this morning. I mean, they have a lot of rules and restrictions prohibiting election-related activity there. What was your reaction when you saw this?
Yeah, I saw the breaking news this morning about this, the story that came out. It's important that a report was filed. I think it should be investigated. We should find out. During my tenure as Secretary of the Army, I was kind of the so-called custodian of Arlington Cemetery, since the Army has responsibility for it. And there is no more hallowed ground in this nation than Arlington Cemetery, where we've been burying our heroes, our veterans, since the Civil War. So, look, I think bottom line, the principle is that no person or party, either side, should ever use Arlington National Cemetery or any of our cemeteries or battlefields for partisan political purposes and or break the so-called rules. We need to maintain its prominence, its importance, its sacredness to the American people, and certainly to the veterans. So I'm anxious to see what comes out of this.
Arlington National Cemetery asked guests to place their hand over their heart during the playing of taps. GOT Rep Mike Waltz was actually filming during the playing of the taps. He posted a video himself. He also captured his friend, GOT Rep Dawa Issa, on his phone during the taps. This is it's just disgusting, and it is unbelievable it is happening at such a high level.
Great
I mean, it's
people.
just, it's preposterous.
What a horrible day it was. We didn't lose one person in 18 months. And then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan.
Good morning, ladies. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm going to be quite measured on what I have to say this morning because my insides are just boiling. Most of you know that I took my 7th trip to Washington, D.C. in July to visit the wall. My second stop on that trip is always Arlington National Cemetery, because that is where heroes are laid to rest. I wake up this morning and I find that the giggling gonad, Petey the Pimp, the Duke of Dysentery, was at Arlington to honor the slain in Afghanistan. I can't even tell you how sick that makes me to my stomach. The person who took 5 deferments for bone spurs, standing at the grave of heroes to make a point. He did this because all of a sudden he knew that he stepped on his dick when he was talking about the Medal of Honor being the same as the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We know that was bullshit. But here's something maybe you don't know. That Donald Trump currently, at this moment, is suing the VA in Michigan. Why? Because the VA in Michigan wants to open up polling places to make it easier for veterans to vote. Because of all the gerrymandering and the redlining that has gone on in the state of Michigan, Trump doesn't want that. So he's suing the VA of Michigan. All this bullshit about how much he loves and appreciates soldiers and their service is all bullshit. Straight up bullshit. This cannot stand. This cannot stand. This disrespect of people who have served this country and put their lives on the line, this cannot.
What would you say to people who may be pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever their politics might be, who just feel like that's not a place for politicians or for politics?
I would have to say, are you in my shoes? I invited him. My son was murdered under the Biden-Harris administration.
Utah Governor Spencer Cox, attending with Trump, posting these photos. He later apologized for using them in a fundraising email.
And tonight, the New York Times reports it got a statement from the family of a Green Beret, Sergeant Andrew Marchinsano, who is buried in the same section of the cemetery where one of the photos was taken. They say they did not give their permission. Joining me now, Basil Schmeichel, Democratic strategist and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. He is now an MSNBC political analyst and Columbia University professor. And Susan Del Percio, a veteran Republican strategist, as well as an MSNBC political analyst. Thank you both for being here. You know, Susan, the soldiers that are laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, they did not fight for a political party. They did not fight for an allegiance to a particular president. They fought for all of us. And when I saw this unfold and everything that's happened in the aftermath, to me, it feels like this is just another example of our norms eroding right in front of us, doesn't it?
It's an example of Donald Trump's blatant disregard and I think sometimes hatred of our country for not understanding how people could fight and protect our country and that has zero respect for them, Simone. How he could possibly and the campaign think they could get away with disregarding the rules of Arlington Cemetery is a slap in the face to every American, not just those who have our Gold Star family members, but especially to those who are, in fact, I mean, it highlights them and their service. And as the reporting shows tonight, there are members who are upset that their family members were used in this way. Again, showing a sacred location of the cemetery being used for political purposes. Only someone like Donald Trump, who has no respect for the military, could possibly do this.
You know, the family of the Green Beret, Sergeant Marchinsano, they said no one asked their permission. And I think that's a very important point, that this is not just people's families are buried here, heroes, people who lost their lives in service of our country. And Basil, that is what the Arlington officials reiterated. They said that any campaign-related activities inside are against federal law, period, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or whomever. Now, Republicans say that they are the law and order party, yet this campaign just can't seem to follow a pretty basic federal law. And it just feels like they're inviting more issues as it relates to service members and veterans. What is really going on here?
Well, you know, Simone, you and Susan, I have worked.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Paul Eaton, Major General, United States Army, retired. Every year, my wife and I pay our respects to the fallen in Arlington National Cemetery. Some were killed in action, some have died of natural causes. It's a very emotive time for us. My father, Colonel Norman Eaton, and his co-pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Getchell, commingled remains are in Section 60. The remains of Lieutenant Ken Ballard, dear son of a close friend, Karen Meredith, are in Section 60. We have stood next to people crying, paying their respects to their sons, daughters, fathers. It's a very emotive event. To see a former president mugging for the camera should never, ever be Commander-in-Chief again for the Armed Forces of the United States. Ever. Disgusting performance by former President Donald Trump.
Okay, this is important, honestly, on this. It is true, Trump was invited. He was invited by some of those family members who Trump has been talking to, right? But this is a really important point. He was not invited by all the families of all the 400,000 veterans and dependents that are buried in Arlington, who did not and cannot consent to be used as props and a backdrop by a few other bereaved families for this individual. That's why the prohibition exists. It's a complete prohibition. It doesn't matter if he was invited. And beyond Vance disparaging someone who works at Arlington National Cemetery for enforcing the rules, is Donald Trump really a president who stands with our veterans instead of one who runs away from them? Really? Donald, I don't like losers. I like people that weren't captured. Trump, the Donald Trump who spent so much of his first presidential campaign attacking the parents. Do you remember this one? Of an American Army officer who died in Iraq in 2004? The Donald Trump who, as president, fumbled the name of a fallen soldier in a condolence call to his widow, then bickered with her and then knocked her in interviews? The Donald Trump who, according to his chief of staff, his own chief of staff, a retired four-star Marine general, refused to pay his respects at a veterans cemetery in Europe, saying, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." And who, on that same trip, called the more than 1,800 Marines who died at Belleau Wood suckers for getting killed? Or was it the Donald Trump who reportedly hated being filmed or photographed with wounded veterans? At Army General Mark Milley's welcoming ceremony as chairman of the Joint Chiefs in 2019, General chosen a combat wounded soldier, Luis Avila, to sing God Bless America at the ceremony. You can see Avila there in the wheelchair. Milley said afterward the president told him, "Why do you bring people like that here? No one wants to see that, the wounded." And if you think, well, all that's in the past, it was just less than 2 weeks ago when Donald Trump used war-wearied American service members as a kind of punchline about how rough they all look in order to talk up one of his biggest political donors.
I really, I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. It's right.
See, they don't have any of those ugly scars or wounds or bullet marks. She's beautiful, right? Isn't that awesome? Isn't that the highest that one could hope for? You could be forgiven for looking at all this and thinking that Trump only has respect for the most revered American institutions, the military, the justice system, free elections, when they're working for him.
What is worse than standing in front of a fallen soldier's grave with a thumbs up, partaking in some sort of campaign publicity stunt? How about physically assaulting Arlington Cemetery officials? Because that's what two of Trump's staffers did. Trump did, in fact, show up to Arlington National Cemetery for a photo op. During Trump's era, we know that there were 63 fallen soldiers, but because he doesn't believe in reality and thinks that none of us will remember, he's running around claiming that Kamala Harris, who wasn't even commander-in-chief, dropped the ball in Afghanistan when withdrawing those troops. It was such a chaotic withdrawal that 13 soldiers lost their lives, never discussing the 63 that lost their lives during his term. Gross, but not so surprising. But then for your campaign staff to have an altercation with officials at Arlington National Cemetery, you were the president. This is sacred ground. It was confirmed that 2 members of the campaign staff had a verbal and physical altercation. They were trying to prevent Trump staffers from filming and photographing. Oh my God, help. They were in a section of recent U.S. casualties, and they shouldn't have been filming there. In fact, federal law prohibits this. Anything that's in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign. So not only is this gross, but he broke the law. Or at least somebody thought that he did, and then Trump staffers just assaulted them. Party of law and order.
I'm urging you, if you know any veterans or anyone who has served, please get them to leave a comment. Please share this video on Facebook, Instagram. If you have WhatsApp, take the link and share it, because what happens here is Trump and co will say something, do something, that gets all the coverage. Doesn't matter if they're lying. In this case, using the dead for a photo opportunity, using those who have laid down their lives for a photo opportunity. The vast majority of people probably don't get to see the fallout, because he's come up with some other story, some other nonsense to take the space as the truth is told, as the facts emerge. He cannot be allowed to get away with this. This is nothing to do with politics. It really isn't. This comes down to basic human respect. If you can't respect those who've laid their lives so that we can be free, really free, then really the problem is you. This isn't like some left or right political ideology. This is actually basic human respect. Listen to somebody whose father is buried in Arlington.
So when was the first moment when you knew you had to do something?
I would say it was the first day of his presidency when he went to the CIA and was completely disrespectful to our great heroes.
In front of the wall with the flag.
In front of the wall. I knew right then I wasn't going to sit around and watch this guy. And the sad thing was, I thought, you know, he could never do anything worse than that. But for 4 years, every single day that I would wake up in the morning, he would have done something even more outrageous. Every single day. I didn't think it was possible. And the bad thing about it is you forget about the stuff he did before, because he did something ridiculous and disrespectful and was a con man every single day.
It's
and
chaos.
You just couldn't get ahead of it.
Chaos agent.
It was chaos.
He was picked. He was handpicked.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is attempting, illegally may I add, to use Arlington Cemetery as a political commercial, desecrating and dishonoring our fallen. Nothing worse than that. That juxtaposition of what these two have done over the last couple of days tells you everything you need to know about.
Visited Arlington National Cemetery earlier this week. Former president is now suggesting the problem stemmed from his campaign's use of photography while he was in Section 60, which is the burial site for recent U.S. casualties. CNN senior political analyst Mark Preston is with us now. What is known about what happened here, Mark?
Well, we're still getting some details, John, but we are seeing the campaign now play out in just about every corner of the nation. Just on Monday, 13 service members died 3 years ago. Donald Trump appeared at the ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. These service members died during that really chaotic and awful withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, what happened is that some of his campaign team showed up with cameras, video equipment, and that is not allowed in Arlington National Cemetery. It is part of the rules of decorum in those cemeteries. There appeared to be some kind of altercation. Now, we're still trying to find out the details of what exactly happened.
He insulted everybody in that room. And I said, somebody should run against John McCain,
who has been, you know, in my opinion, not so hot. And I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. It's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, you know, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you
He's a
agree
war
with
hero.
that?
He's a war hero.